Play us off, Kaz.
Behind us, we have the new Trek Fuel EX. This is an exciting bike that can take many different shapes and forms. In this current form, it is the 145mm travel version with a 150mm fork, 64.5-degree head tube angle. The size large has 442mm chainstays. Those are somewhat size specific, and there are a bunch of different adjustments.
This one's priced at $6,499 US and it weighs in at 32.08 pounds. Let's start with the climbing, as most rides do. Starting with the climbing, I've spent a bunch of time on the longer travel version of this, the aluminum framed one. I had that thing built up to be a kind of burly, free-ride, enduro-y type of bike. That's not what this is.
Definitely not. You're riding the aluminum one in the park. This 145 travel bike, this thing fits right in at home in sort of the middle ground zone for trail bikes, we'd call it. Definitely stacks up against last year's winner, the Canyon Spectral. Very similar figures there. And yeah, we found it just to be, let's say, pretty mild-mannered. There's no sort of standouts in any regard. Climbing, maybe you found it to be slightly taller in stature.
It's got a really tall front end and higher rise bars, which I kind of like. That gives you that more enduro type pedaling feel where you're kind of sitting back, comfort, you know, almost like your town cruiser bike. But it still feels plenty quick. There's still plenty of support when you're standing up and putting the power down. But you know, riders that do want that more kind of traditional, a little bit more hunched over feel, you could put a lower rise bar on there, but I like the comfort that this thing delivers.
Yeah, I think that's something to be said there. Trek's maybe listening to riders who are taller, on that taller end of the spectrum. They're usually looking for a taller stack, taller bar height, just to give them that comfort, even while climbing. For me, the size large was definitely a bit of a stretch, and then the medium, just looking at those numbers, although we didn't ride it, might feel a bit cramped. They did get rid of that medium/large size, that middle ground I really liked. So sad to see that go away, but I did find this, yeah, relatively easy to climb with. Good clearance, good support from the suspension like you talked about. Spent a lot of time with the shock in a linear setting, and that definitely helped hold the bottom bracket up higher while climbing, you know, avoiding those obstacles.
Yeah, I think there was a time where Treks traditionally had a little bit more softer suspension feel. It felt like there was kind of an era in the Trek timeline where it wasn't as responsive, and I think over the last few years they've really changed their flavor a little bit, and for the better. You just don't feel like you're mushing through the travel. It's using the travel well, so you can, like you were saying, it holds you up higher, which is what you want, especially if you're going through multiple kind of chunky rocks, whether you're climbing or descending. You don't just want to be sitting in the bottom of the travel. So they've done a good job with the shock tune and the changes to the kinematics of the bike.
And this bike is the XT Di2 build. How'd you find that shifting performance and the shift speed of that stuff?
Yeah, I really like how that XT stuff shifts. The lever, very ergonomic, feels nice and crisp, quick shifting, under loads, works well. As we'll get to in the descending, I can do the spoiler. It's pretty noisy. The chain slap is really loud on that Di2 system, so that is a con. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but yeah, it works well for climbing. Drivetrain works great. It's got that 30-tooth chainring, which it's appropriate for the bike, and if you have some steeper trails, you're gonna really enjoy that easier gear. I'll wrap up climbing with just kind of talking about the weight. This is on the, I don't want to say heavy, but it's 32 pounds, so I think it's one of the heavier bikes we have in this test. And I think that kind of is an example of what this bike, kind of where it sits on the trail bike spectrum. You know, it's definitely towards the more aggressive side of things. It's not your super light, overgrown XC bike. It's a trail bike for doing trail bike things, which means climbing a bunch, but then also descending on some rowdier terrain. I think that's where this one sits, where we also have a bike like the Intense Spider, which is kind of more on your light trail side of things. I know it's, you know, we're splitting hairs again. People get up in arms when we have too many categories, but there's, you know, bikes for every purpose. And I think this one's definitely for someone that wants to push things a little bit harder.
Yeah, this is a bike that you can ride all day in just about any terrain, not be held back in too many regards, but definitely catering to chunkier terrain rather than that flatter, pumpy stuff that we see more around here. For me, I found this bike to be really balanced, very solid feeling bike. Suspension, yeah, in both setups, the more linear and more progressive zones do different things for sure. The linear gives you more support, easier to push against, stay on top of that first part of the travel, generate more speed, better for clearing jumps, for pumping through berms and flatter terrain, and then the more progressive setting, more supple, more forgiveness in more jarring, rocky downhills.
Yeah, and making that switch is really easy. Just the lower shock mount has a little flip chip. You could do it trail side if you wanted to. I did it one time just to kind of feel the difference, but just takes one Allen key, pull it out, flip the little chip, and you can try the two different settings and see what works best. Yeah, I'm with you. I ended up just sticking it in progressive in the end just to kind of get a little, take some of the edge off the rougher stuff, but both are very, very usable with the air shock that's on there. Bike's coil compatible too, so if you wanted to make, you know, live the coil life, you could do that as well. And this was the bike that I took out the trails that are around here in Arkansas. There's a couple little jump zones and some kind of mini trail gaps and step downs and things. And this is the bike that I felt the most comfortable on, riding it hard. Like, I didn't feel like you were overriding it. It felt appropriate for hitting some medium-sized drops and jumps and things. Yeah, it didn't feel sketchy, which is good.
Yeah, and I guess, talking about the bigger side of these features around here, this frame, I would say, is maybe leaning towards the stiffer end, which is a good thing because you can bump up the travel by removing that shock travel spacer. So you could get more travel out of this. You can even buy an aftermarket lower shock mount and install a 27.5 rear wheel. There's lots of different options for this bike. So pretty cool thing that Trek has done with the fuel models in general. We do have some minor issues or gripes, more so with the chain slap on this bike.
Yeah, exactly. Just the derail, like, it has decent chain slap protection, especially on the top. The chain actually rides pretty close to the protection on purpose. At least Trek says it's on purpose. But the way that the Shimano derailleur works, it's a kind of a spring-loaded design rather than a clutch like they had in their previous version. So when it gets pulled forward and then back, it just gets a really loud rack. It just kind of whoop-ah, and it's noisy and it's annoying. So we've said it a lot. It might, hopefully it doesn't become a trend whenever we have these XT or XTR equipped bikes in, but it does make the bike a lot noisier than I feel like it needs to be.
Yeah, I didn't find it to happen as frequently as you might notice chain slap on other bikes that are notoriously loud, where it just taps against the frame. It's more those larger bottom out impacts where the derailleur really winds up and slaps back.
But the rest of the frame is well sorted. It's got that storage compartment, pretty good solid latch. It didn't have it rattling. That's another thing. Sometimes storage doors can rattle. This one's pretty quiet. It doesn't have as much room as maybe, say, like a Santa Cruz. They tend to have like a bigger storage box, but you can still fit a jacket and some snacks in there or something if you wanted to. But otherwise, yeah, the frame is very straightforward. And you mentioned all those links and the different options. So people that want to tinker, plenty to tinker with on this bike.
Trek has really thought about everything on this frame. We talked about the adjustability, the in-frame storage, cable routing, all that good stuff. But then even looking at the seat tube and the seat post insertion depth, seat tube is very straight. Even for myself riding the size large, I could get that long travel dropper post down in the frame and allow me to move around that big bike pretty easily.
That brings us to like the value components discussion. I think as the value goes, $64.99, pretty good value for this bike. Full carbon frame, that wireless drivetrain, and Trek's lineup is pretty extensive. You can go on their site, you can get very confused if you go on their website, because even for us that live and breathe all these numbers and things, when we looked at their site, it's overwhelming because they all share the same frame, and on their website, all the frames have the same color. So it just it's pretty mind-boggling. So yeah, maybe brew yourself a strong cup of coffee and just prepare to spend some time figuring it all out, or ask a friend, because it's confusing. But the gist of it though is there's a lot of options, so you can kind of get whatever spec you want. Aluminum frame, carbon frame, Shimano, SRAM, it's all on there. So yeah, there are good values to be had. I say that the pricing is actually pretty decent on some of those kind of mid-level builds, and the build kits themselves are solid. So yeah, good work, Trek, on picking the parts for this bike.
All right, getting to the end of this with the pros and cons. The good things, the versatility, can't be enough said there. Tons of ways to set up this bike. Lots of potential for customization for your neck of the woods. Short travel, long travel, mullet, 29. There's aluminum, there's carbon options. This is just a very versatile bike that Trek has built. And then even going further in that, they've tuned the chainstays to be almost size specific. So this bike is really well balanced.
Yeah, the final pro, I think it worked well. The suspension feel itself was really good in this version for the rockier trails around here. It was nice to have a little extra travel. Yeah, the overall is just kind of a regular bike, but in the best way. It's kind of the extra regular term that we say every once in a while. Bike comes in, it just works. It's how you want a bike to work, and I think that Trek got that with the Fuel EX. It's not boring either though. Sometimes regular seems boring, but I had a great time riding this bike. I wasn't bored. Work does what you want it to. It doesn't. Some bikes feel they can be too regular and they kind of fall flat. You're just like, just a bike. But this one, I had a good time on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it vanilla by any means. Just everything's very neutral, what you would expect from a well-balanced, well-thought-out bike.
Yeah, let's get into some cons. I think the con, just based on this build, I think the XT rear derailleur chain slap is pretty annoying. There are different builds, so it's not really bike related. And I think the other con, it's not necessarily a con, but if you're looking for a trail bike, you might be better suited to the Top Fuel. Now, I reviewed that earlier in the year, and that's their 120, 130 bike, or 130, 140, depending on how you have it set up. And that's kind of more in that lighter duty side of the trail spectrum, but it rides really well too. And so I think if people want to cover a lot of ground and have that more true trail bike, Top Fuel is the one. This one, I don't know, all mountain? It's almost an all mountain bike, right?
Yeah, they're kind of overlapping 3 segments by bringing that down to 2. Mm-hmm. They're kind of going from XC and light trail with the Top Fuel, and now trail and almost to enduro with the ways you can build this Fuel EX. So yeah, kind of covering 3 birds with 2 stones, if you will.
Yeah, it's hard because I think they're trying to make it easy, but I feel like they've made it complicated. For the consumer, it may be a bit challenging to figure out what bike they want. It exists though, it's a nice thing. You can find the bike you want in this lineup, but it is going to take some time just to kind of narrow down and figure out exactly the bike for you. But if you want the kind of light, more traditional feeling trail bike, Top Fuel, but if you want something a little bit smashier and with even more versatility, the Fuel EX, good option.
All right, I think we've drummed that one to death. Versatility is the name of the game with the Fuel EX. Stay tuned for the roundtable discussion and more videos from the field test.